Imagine a world where stealing could cost you your life. Now envision a different society where the same crime requires only a payback of double the stolen amount. These are not fictional scenarios, but the stark reality of the contrasting laws of Khammurabi and Jehovah. Let's take a step back into history, back to the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia. Here we find the oldest deciphered writings of laws known as Hammurabi's Code. It was a legal structure that was as intricate as it was harsh, where crimes like stealing could warrant the ultimate penalty, death. On the other side, we have Jehovah's laws, drawn from the sacred texts of the Bible. In striking contrast to Hammurabi's Code, Jehovah's laws were marked by a sense of balance and proportionality. For instance, under these laws, the punishment for stealing was simply the restoration of double the stolen amount. Take another crime, like burglary. Under Hammurabi's Code, the punishment was once again death. But Jehovah's laws demanded a penalty mirroring that of stealing, restoration of double the stolen amount. The differences don't stop there. When it came to harboring a fugitive slave, Hammurabi's Code declared it an offense worthy of death. On the contrary, Jehovah's laws did not even categorize it as an offense. And what about the treatment of slaves? In Hammurabi's world, injuring a slave meant compensating the master. But under Jehovah's laws, it was the slave who was compensated, granted their freedom. The disparity extends to the treatment of the rich and the poor. Under both sets of laws, injuring a rich man resulted in the same injury inflicted on the injurer. However, for injuring a poor man, Hammurabi's laws imposed a fine, while Jehovah's laws continued to uphold the principle of an eye for an eye. As we delve deeper into these laws, we see not only a difference in penalties, but also a clear disparity in the value of human life and justice. In Hammurabi's world, justice seems to be a reflection of one's social status. However, in Jehovah's laws, each case stands on its own merits. Take, for instance, the laws regarding injury. In Hammurabi's Code, if you injure a rich man, the same injury is inflicted upon you, mirroring the biblical principle of an eye for an eye. Yet the story changes when you injure a poor man. Instead of receiving the same injury, you'll merely fined 1 mina of silver, a stark contrast to Jehovah's laws, where the same injury is inflicted regardless of the wealth or status of the person injured. Then there's the matter of injury resulting in death. In Hammurabi's Code, if a rich man's daughter dies due to an injury you caused, the law demands an unimaginable price, the death of your own daughter. But if the same fate befalls a poor man's daughter, you're only required to pay a fine of 5 shekels of silver. Jehovah's laws, however, don't make such distinctions. Each case is judged on its own merits. The punishment isn't determined by the social status of the victim, but by the nature of the crime itself. In Hammurabi's world, a man's worth seems to be measured by his wealth and social standing. The punishment for a crime isn't just about the crime itself, but who the victim is. If you're rich, the law protects you fiercely. If you're poor, the law seems less concerned about your welfare. But in Jehovah's world, every man is equal in the eyes of the law. Your wealth, your social standing, none of that matters. What matters is justice, pure and simple. In the eyes of Hammurabi's laws, it appears that wealth and social standing dictate the severity of punishment, but Jehovah's laws seem to uphold a more universal principle of justice, irrespective of one's social status. From our journey through these ancient laws, it's clear that they provide a window into the societies they were created to govern. While both Hammurabi's laws and Jehovah's laws were designed to maintain order, they each reflect a different approach to justice. Hammurabi's laws, for instance, often prescribed harsh and sometimes unequal punishments, such as death for stealing or harboring a fugitive slave. Meanwhile, Jehovah's laws leaned towards restitution, often requiring culprits to restore double of what they had stolen. Moreover, while in Hammurabi's laws the punishment for injuring a rich man and a poor man differed significantly, Jehovah's laws made no such distinction, treating all offenses equally. These disparities not only reveal the inherent inequality in Hammurabi's laws, but also underscore the fairness and equity in Jehovah's laws. While Hammurabi's laws and Jehovah's laws were designed to maintain order, their stark differences remind us that justice, at its core, is a reflection of the values and principles of a society. Dive into the depths of time where we meet Khammurabi, a Babylonian king known for his law code. Khammurabi, an influential leader of the First Babylonian dynasty, reigned around the 18th century BC. His reign was marked by significant advances in governance, primarily through the creation of the Code of Khammurabi. This legal code, inscribed on a towering stone stele, is one of the oldest deciphered writings of significant length in the world. The Code of Khammurabi is more than just a historical artifact. It's a glimpse into the social structure and morality of an ancient civilization. It illustrates the concept of written law, a cornerstone of civilization that provides structure, maintains order, and protects the rights of individuals. Intriguingly, this ancient Babylonian code has echoes in the book of Genesis, part of the Bible's Old Testament. The laws and societal norms presented in Hammurabi's code find surprising parallels in the narrative of Genesis. Now that we have our historical bearings, let's explore how Hammurabi's code operates within Genesis. The first instance we encounter is the law of adoption. It's a fascinating concept, prevalent in numerous societies throughout history, but let's dive into its manifestation in the biblical context. In Genesis 15, Eliezer, a servant in Abram's household, is declared Abram's heir. This adoption, you might say, is a perfect reflection of the laws laid down in Hammurabi's code. Section 191 of Hammurabi's code stipulates that if a man who has no offspring expresses the wish to adopt a son and then adopts one, that son cannot be claimed back. This law mirrors Abram's adoption of Eliezer, illustrating how the ancient laws shaped societal norms, even in the biblical narrative. Moving on, let's explore the intriguing matter of inheritance. In Genesis 48, Jacob gifts a special portion to his favorite son, Joseph. This act of favoritism is not random, nor is it merely a product of his fatherly affection. It's actually in accordance with Hammurabi's code, section 165, which allows for a man to present a special gift to one whom he loves, even if it means bypassing the traditional line of inheritance. Finally, we must discuss the curious case of Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob, who was cut off from his birthright. This event, as told in Genesis 49, might seem harsh to modern readers, but it was actually prescribed by Hammurabi's law. According to section 158, if a son commits a grave offense against his father has the right to disinherit him. These narratives show how deeply Hammurabi's laws influence societal norms and practices. Whether it's adoption or inheritance, the tales from Genesis mirror the ancient Babylonian legal code, providing us with a captivating glimpse into the past. It's a testament to the far-reaching impact of Hammurabi's code, a set of laws that guided societies thousands of years ago and still resonate in the stories we tell today. Next, we encounter laws concerning women in both Genesis and Hammurabi's code. In the ancient world, women often found themselves at the intersection of family dynamics and legal provisions. The tales of Hagar, Bilhah, and Zilpah in the book of Genesis offer a poignant example. Hagar, an Egyptian maidservant, was given to Abraham by his wife Sarah. This arrangement is a stark reflection of Hammurabi's code, specifically section 146, which allowed for such practices in light of a wife's infertility. The law ensured the continuation of a man's lineage, even when nature appeared to be a roadblock. Similarly, Bilhah and Zilpah, maidservants of Rachel and Leah, respectively, were given to Jacob to bear him children. This too was in line with the Babylonian code, reinforcing the idea that a man's legacy was of paramount importance, often superseding the personal desires or ambitions of the women involved. However, it's crucial to note that these laws were not completely devoid of protections for women. The code did exhibit some concern for their welfare. A case in point is Abram's inability to see Hagar, as detailed in Genesis 16 verse 6. This is consistent with section 119 of Hammurabi's code, which provided some safeguards for women against mistreatment. These instances of women being given to men for procreation and the protective provisions were not mere societal norms or customs. They were legal stipulations deeply ingrained in the fabric of ancient societies, and their influence can be seen in the narratives of Genesis. The parallels here reveal the historical realities faced by women. They were often pawns in the larger game of lineage and inheritance. However, they were not entirely without rights or protections. The laws of Khammurabi, while reflecting a patriarchal society, also demonstrate a nuanced approach to women's rights within the constraints of their time. And so, through the lens of the ancient past, we gain insights into the complex interplay of law, society, and gender. Let's now turn to the laws dealing with property and a theft. Hammurabi's code was not just a set of laws, it was a detailed system for property rights and theft prevention. Let's take a look at some examples from Genesis to understand how these rules were translated into practice. First, we come to the episode of Abraham's purchase of Machpelah. The transaction was conducted in strict conformity with Hammurabi's commercial enactments, specifically rule number 191. This rule ensured fair dealings in property transactions, making sure that both parties were treated justly. Abraham's adherence to this process is a testament to the importance of these laws in maintaining societal order. Next, we find Jacob making a drastic proposal to Laban. He suggested that if anyone was found stealing, their punishment should be death. This might seem severe to us, but it was in line with Hammurabi's code, specifically rule number 6. The code took a harsh stance against theft, particularly when it involves sacred objects. The severity of the punishment was meant to deter potential thieves and protect the sanctity of religious items. Finally, we have the case of Joseph's steward, who proposed that the person found with the stolen cup should be executed. This was in harmony with Hammurabi's law, which punished theft from a palace with death. The stiff penalty underlined the importance of respecting the property of the ruling class and served as a deterrent to potential thieves. In all these instances, we see how the laws of Hammurabi were woven into the fabric of society, influencing not just legal proceedings but also personal interactions and conflicts. They provided a framework for resolving disputes and maintaining social order, while also reflecting the values and priorities of the time. These instances show how Hammurabi's laws governed property rights and theft. Finally, we come to the laws concerning punishments. The severity of the punishments prescribed by Hammurabi's code is quite striking, and we find evidence of this in the Bible's Genesis. Consider the story of Judah and his daughter-in-law Tamar. In Genesis chapter 38, verse 24, Judah threatens Tamar with a severe punishment for her perceived transgressions. It's a shocking moment in the narrative, but one that aligns perfectly with the Babylonian code of Khammurabi. Section 110 of Hammurabi's code prescribes the taking of life by burning for specific offenses. It's a harsh measure, one that Judah seems ready to impose on Tamar. Yet this isn't a random or capricious punishment, it's a response grounded in the legal and ethical framework of their time. This isn't the only instance where we see the influence of Hammurabi's code in Genesis. For example, in Genesis chapter 44, verse 9, Joseph's steward proposes a similarly severe punishment for the person found with Joseph's cup: death. This too is in harmony with Hammurabi's code, which stipulates death for any theft from a palace as per section 6. It's essential to remember that these are not arbitrary punishments. They are part of a structured legal system, one that aimed to regulate society and maintain order. The severity of these punishments reflects the values and norms of that society, but it also speaks to their understanding of justice and retribution. However, it's also crucial to note that these laws and their corresponding punishments were not fixed. They evolved and changed over time, influenced by the shifting dynamics of society and the evolving understanding of justice. As we delve into these laws and their punishments, we're not just learning about an ancient society. We're gaining insights into the evolution of law and justice, the cultural and social norms of a time long past, and their impact on our own legal and ethical frameworks. The severity of these punishments, as dictated by Hammurabi's code, is quite striking. As we conclude, let's reflect on these surprising connections between Hammurabi's code and Genesis. We've delved into the realm of adoption and inheritance laws, observing how the law of adoption in Hammurabi's code made Eliezer Abram's heir. We've seen the code's influence on the stories of Hagar, Bilhah, and Zilpah, and how it shaped the narrative of Machpelah's purchase by Abraham. We explored how the code's property and theft laws echoed in the proposal by Joseph's steward and the punishment proposed by Jacob to Laban. We have also discovered its role in the punishments prescribed in Genesis, from the threat of life by burning to the cutting off of Reuben from his birthright. These findings reveal the intricate weave of ancient laws into the fabric of Genesis. These connections illuminate how ancient laws influenced and shaped the stories we find in Genesis, reminding us that history and scripture often intertwine in fascinating ways.
Have you ever pondered on the role laws play in religious texts? They are a fascinating subject, serving as a cornerstone in the foundation of many societies. The laws found in religious scriptures aren't arbitrary. They're divinely inspired, providing a moral compass and a roadmap for human behavior. Let's take the Bible, for instance. It's a rich tapestry of narratives, wisdom, prophecies, and yes, laws. The laws established in religious texts like the Bible have been instrumental in shaping civilizations, influencing legal systems, and fostering societal order. These laws serve a variety of purposes. They guide worship, dictate moral and ethical behavior, and even manage societal relationships. They provide a sense of stability and predictability, offering a framework for individuals to understand their roles and responsibilities within their communities. Consider the laws found in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. The laws presented here are not isolated rules, but are part of a broader narrative woven seamlessly into the story of creation, fall, and redemption. They're confirmed later in the Mosaic Code, a collection of laws given to Moses on Mount Sinai, which further underscores their significance and continuity. These laws range from the law of the Sabbath, emphasizing the importance of rest and worship, to the law of sacrifices, outlining the process of atonement. They cover laws on cleanliness, dietary practices, and social behavior, providing comprehensive guidelines for the community. But it's not just about rules and regulations. These laws carry profound theological implications. They reflect the character of the divine lawgiver, highlighting attributes like justice, mercy, and holiness. They also underscore the human need for divine guidance and the consequences of disobedience. So, when we delve into the study of laws in religious texts, we're not just exploring ancient legal codes. We're delving into the heart of divine human relationships, the dynamics of societal order, and the quest for moral and spiritual integrity. Let's dive into some of these laws found in the book of Genesis, which later appear in the Mosaic Code. Let's begin with the laws on worship, sacrifice, and cleanliness. These laws, originating from the book of Genesis, form a crucial part of religious observance and social conduct. Firstly, the law of the Sabbath, a day of rest observed on the seventh day of the week, is a divine commandment. It's a day dedicated to worship and abstention from work, a practice that continues to resonate in faith communities today. The law of the place to worship signifies the importance of a designated sacred space for worship. This law, first seen in Genesis, was later reiterated in Exodus and Deuteronomy. It underscores the significance of having a specific place for worship, a concept that has shaped the construction of temples, churches, mosques, and synagogues around the world. Next, we have the law of the acceptance of sacrifice by fire from heaven. This law, instituted in Genesis, dictates that a sacrifice becomes valid when consumed by a divine fire. This regulation, though no longer practiced, has shaped historical understanding of divine acceptance and ritualistic offerings. The law of sacrifices, also first seen in Genesis, outlines the types of offerings acceptable to God. This law has been instrumental in shaping the rituals and practices of sacrifice across various faith traditions. Turning to the law of clean and unclean, we find guidelines for distinguishing between pure and impure entities, which could be animals, food, or even people. This law, deeply embedded in religious texts, has profound implications, influencing dietary rules and social interactions. Lastly, the law of the altar, again originating from Genesis, provides instructions on the construction and use of altars for worship and sacrifice. The altar, a physical representation of a divine presence, plays a central role in many religious ceremonies. These laws not only regulated religious practices, but also had implications for social and personal life. They have shaped not just the way we worship, but also how we live, eat, and interact with others. And while some of these laws might seem archaic, they continue to influence contemporary religious thought and practice, underlining the enduring power of these ancient texts. Next, we delve into laws related to dietary practices and social behavior. These rules, found in the Genesis and subsequently confirmed in the Mosaic Code, not only governed what was consumed, but also how individuals interacted with each other. First off, we encounter the law of eating flesh. According to Genesis chapter 9, verse 3, humans were given the right to eat meat. This law was later confirmed in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 20. However, there was a strict prohibition against consuming blood. Genesis chapter 9, verse 4 explicitly states this. This law is further reinforced in Leviticus chapter 7 and 17, emphasizing the sanctity of life symbolized by blood. Moving from dietary laws to social laws, we see the law against murder. Genesis chapter 9, verses 5 and 6 bestow upon each human life a sacred status, making taking a life a grave offense. This is echoed in Exodus chapter 20, verse 13, and Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 17. Next, we come across the law of parental authority. It underscores the respect and obedience children owe to their parents, as stated in Genesis chapters 9, 18, and 22, and further emphasized in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12, and Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16. In the realm of marital laws, Genesis introduces the law of monogamy in chapters 12 and 16, and Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 and 2, reiterate this law. This law ensured the sanctity and exclusivity of the marital bond. Alongside this, the law against adultery was strictly enforced. Genesis chapters 12, 20, 26, 38, and 39, along with Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10, strongly condemn adultery. These laws, as we can see, were instrumental in shaping societal norms and behaviors. They provided a moral compass, guiding individuals on how to live harmoniously with others and maintain a balanced relationship with the world around them. Moving on, let's explore laws associated with priesthood, tithes, and righteousness. Diving right in, we have the law of priesthood, seen in Genesis 14:18 and confirmed in Exodus 28:1. It outlines the religious authority and responsibilities bestowed upon priests. They served as mediators between the divine and mankind, conducting religious ceremonies and making sacrifices. Alongside this, there were also specific laws regarding priestly garments. These were not just clothes, but symbols of their holy office. In Genesis 27:15 and 37:3, we see references to special garments which were later codified in Exodus 28:4, demonstrating the significance of these vestments in religious rites. Next, we come to the law of tithes, first mentioned in Genesis 14:20 and 28:22. This law, reiterated in Leviticus 27:30-32, mandated that a portion of one's income or produce be given to the religious institution or the clergy. It was a form of religious tax, meant to support the religious establishment and the welfare of the priests. Covenant making, seen in Genesis 15:10 and 18 and later confirmed in Exodus 34:27, is another important law. These were solemn agreements between God and mankind, often involving promises, obligations, and rituals. They were significant in defining the relationship between the divine and the human. The law of intercession, visible in Genesis 17:18, 20:17, and 24, outlines the role of intercessors, who pleaded on behalf of others before God. This role was often fulfilled by prophets or priests. The law of righteousness, introduced in Genesis 17:1 and reinforced in Deuteronomy 18:13, emphasizes moral and ethical conduct, urging individuals to walk in the path of virtue and moral rectitude. Lastly, we have the law of circumcision, first instituted in Genesis 17:9, 10, and later ratified in Leviticus 12:3. This physical symbol of the covenant between God and Abraham became an important ritual in the religious tradition. These laws were instrumental in establishing religious authority and promoting moral behavior. Finally, let's delve into laws on hospitality, morality, and ceremonial practices. The law of hospitality, as seen in Genesis, emphasizes the importance of treating strangers with kindness and respect, a sentiment echoed in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. This law is closely tied to morality, with specific laws against licentiousness and fornication serving as reminders of the expectations for ethical conduct. Then we have the law of oaths, which underscores the gravity of making promises or swearing to certain actions. Alongside this, there's the law of binding sacrifices, a practice that signified devotion and submission to divine authority. Moving on, we come across the law of birthright, which pertained to inheritance and privilege. This was often symbolized through the anointing with oil, a ceremonial practice that marked a person or object as sacred or significant. Next, we encounter the obligation of vows, which, like oaths, were regarded as solemn commitments that should not be taken lightly. This is followed by the law against idolatry, a stern prohibition against the worship of false gods. The law of uncleanness regulated interactions and activities based on perceived purity, while the law against marriage between circumcised and uncircumcised individuals provided guidelines for matrimonial alliances. Ceremonial cleansing for worship was another crucial practice, designed to prepare individuals for religious observances. The law of drink offerings, too, played a key part in worship, often accompanying sacrifices or offerings. Another interesting law is that of marrying the brother's widow, a rule that aimed to protect the widow and continue the brother's lineage. Additionally, there's the law of preaching, which guided the sharing of religious teachings and doctrines. Finally, the law of dowry provided regulations for marriage transactions, ensuring the rights and protections of the bride. These laws served to regulate personal behavior, societal interactions, and religious practices. So, what impact do these laws have on us today? From laws on worship and sacrifice to dietary practices, social behavior, and ceremonial rites, these ancient codes have shaped our moral compass and societal norms for millennia. They underpin many of our religious practices, offering a sense of continuity, community, and shared values. Even as cultures evolve and societies progress, these laws persist, their fundamental principles echoing across time. While the times have changed, the fundamental principles these laws represent continue to resonate in our societies today.